Good morning, Mr. Soni. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Chairperson.
Yes, are we ready?
Yes. Chairperson, you will recall that among the witnesses who were going to be called today were Mr. Oswald Mashaba. And I made that point again yesterday relating to the fact that a summons had been served on him to appear today. I must record that Mr. Mashaba is not here, and subsequent to the exchanges we had, you and I, Chairperson, yesterday, his attorney has sent a letter to the Commission saying that Mr. Mashaba will not be here.
Have you got it there? Are you going to
Yes, I'll give you a bunch. Sorry,
are you going to read it into the record?
Yes, but I'll give you a bunch. I want to do something, Mr. Chairperson, that it is not simply his not coming, but the circumstances. So we've prepared a small bundle to indicate to you all the relevant exchanges relating to his non-appearance.
Yes.
But perhaps I should answer your question. I'll give you a copy of that, but it will be together with other correspondence.
That's fine.
May I have leave to hand it up, Chair?
Yeah.
Chairperson, you'll see in the bundle there are a number of documents there. It's the document right at it's the last document in that bundle, and it's a letter from Mr. Cameron dated today.
Yes.
I should read it into the record.
Yes, please.
Just so that we record that he's not going to be here. It says, we'd address this communication to you on the instruction of our client, and the client being Mr. Mashaba, as appears above, with specific reference to the document and more specifically to the contents of your communication dated the 16th of February 2021. And in the last paragraph, in closing, we confirm and record that our client will not be appearing at the Commission today, and more particularly for the reason that our client does not accept that the document constitutes a lawful and legally binding summons.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure that, I'm looking at the last letter in the bundle, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Are you still in the first paragraph or you have?
No, I've moved to the last paragraph to get to, I'm sorry. I just wanted to, and then I want to go through the correspondence.
No, that's fine. Just I think complete reading it, I'll just have to read it.
As you please.
Yeah.
So in the first paragraph, he says, we address this communication to you on the instructions of our client with specific reference to the document and more specifically to the contents of your communication dated 16th February 2021. Now, Chairperson, I may just say, as the prelude to the letter, the writer describes the document as the document purporting to be the summons that was served on Mr. Montana. So he's saying, I don't recognize that. Then he says, as regards the contents of paragraph 3 of your communication, 1, the recordals contained therein only came to the writer's attention on receipt of that communication. That is, same when not within the writer's knowledge when our communication dated 15th February 2021 was transmitted to you, and we request that you furnish ourselves with a transcribed record of what took place at that hearing, as we hold instructions for our client to seek an opinion from senior counsel. And then the third paragraph then says, Chairperson, In closing, we confirm and record that our client will not be appearing at the Commission today, and more particularly for the reason that our client does not accept that the document constitutes a lawful and legally binding summons. You are requested to acknowledge receipt hereof, and it's signed by Mr. Cameron, the attorney.
Yes.
Ms. Chairperson, the Commission dealt with this similar situation last week, Chairperson, on Monday last week.
Yes.
Where a witness was summoned to appear and didn't appear.
Yes.
And as a result of that, the Commission has taken certain action to ensure that the disrespect displayed and the unlawful conduct is not gone unpunished.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Chairperson, what I want to say is this letter that I've just read does not appear in a vacuum. There are a series of exchanges, but I only want to deal with the relevant ones, and they are contained in the bundle of documents I sent to you. You will see, Chairperson, that what is crucial in that set of documents is the summons, which Mr. Cameron calls the document that purports to be a summons. And when he received, soon after he received that, we got a letter from Mr. Cameron saying that they do not recognize that document as a summons, and they will not appear. We, the very next day, and that, Chairperson, happened on Monday last week, when Mr. Cameron wrote to us. On Tuesday, we wrote back to say that you will be aware that a similar issue arose at the Commission's hearing yesterday, and we are saying to you, it is not open to your client to simply ignore the summons. If he wants to challenge the validity of the summons, he must do so in court, but until it is set aside, it retains its legal validity. And it is then, Chairperson, that you and I had that exchange yesterday relating to what was going to happen today.
Yes.
And the last letter I've just read is a response to our previous letter of the 17th,
Yes.
and the exchange yesterday. Now, Chairperson, the approach of the legal team to this is that Mr. Mashaba's conduct can't go unanswered. He cannot defy a summons. He's obviously entitled to challenge it and so on. And what we would like to do, Chairperson, is to go through the documents with you, because of course if there is sufficient cause, then in terms of Section 6 of the Commissions Act, he would be entitled not to come. But the question is whether it is that, and should you be satisfied based on the information that you have that there isn't a sufficient cause before you to then introduce legal steps against Mr. Mashaba.
Yeah.
Chairperson, I say that also having regard to a point you made last week, Monday, when this situation first arose before the Commission, where there was a defiance of an appearance of a summons to appear. And the point you made, Chairperson, is that that is going to lead to more such defiances. And that's exactly what has And it is for that reason that we submit that the matter must be dealt with formally now, and the steps taken as you, as the chairperson, would determine.
So this may well be the start
That's my fear.
of more people who will defy summonses issued by the Commission and refuse to appear before the Commission, which obviously undermines in a very significant way the work of the Commission when people who have knowledge of certain transactions and events that are relevant to the investigation of the Commission refuse to appear when they have been served with summonses. And this may defeat the objectives of the Commission. And I note that in the letter, Mr. Mashaba's attorney doesn't put up any factual or legal grounds for his client's view that the summons that was served on his client is not a summons or is not valid. That is what also Mr. Zuma's attorneys did in their letter to say he was not going to appear last week. They said the summons was irregular without saying, giving grounds on which they were saying the summons was irregular. So this witness is basically doing the same thing. And we may well see more. I hope not. Yes, okay, all right.
Chairperson, then may I go through the documents as they appear before you? You will see the first document, Chairperson, is the proof of service of the document on Mr. Mashaba.
Of the summons.
Of the summons
Yeah.
on Mr. Mashaba.
Because it was a summons.
Yes.
It wasn't just a document.
No, sorry.
It was an important process, legal process. It was a summons, and it was labeled as such.
Yes.
Yes.
And of course, the service is not an issue because the very fact that they're challenging it means they received it. But I just say that we took all steps to ensure that there were no procedural grounds on which that could be challenged. Then, Chairperson, the next
And
document...
of course, the Commission has issued, from what I remember, many summonses over the past 3 years, both summonses for witnesses or people to appear, as well as summonses for the production of documents. I don't know if I saw a figure that is close to or above 1,000, I'm not sure. Or whether it was close to above 100, I'm not sure. But whether it was 100 or around 100 or 1,000, it's still a high number.
Yes.
And mostly people have accepted the summonses and complied with them.
Yes.
Most of the time.
Yes.
Okay.
So the summons, Chairperson, reads, summons to appear as a witness, and it records, and this is I just point out, Chairperson, that in terms of the Commissions Act, the format of the summons must be in terms determined by yourself as Chairperson. And this is this is the manner in which the summonses have been issued. We checked with the Secretariat. And it alerts Mr. Mashaba to the fact that the summons is issued in terms of Section 3.2 of the Commissions Act to be read with Proclamation 3 published on the 25th of January 2018, Government Notice 105 published on the 9th of February 2018, then the rules of the Commission. And Chairperson, the terms of the summons read as follows. To the Sheriff or his deputy, inform Mr. Mashaba, and the address is given.
Well, let's include his name so that it's not as if the summons just put the surname without the name.
No, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Inform Mr. Oswald Mashaba, and his address being AM House 20 Bavaria Avenue.
Or maybe you might not need to read the address. Yes, but it is there.
Yes. And then he is to be informed that he is hereby summoned to appear before the Commission personally at the Civic Centre, 158 Civic Boulevard, Braamfontein, Johannesburg, at 10 a.m. on the 24th of February 2021, that's today, for the purposes of giving evidence before the Commission and being questioned about matters arising from the relevant parts of the affidavits and or the reports listed in Annexure here A2. And Chairperson, I'll just point out that that annexure refers to the affidavit of Mr. Molefe dated the 25th of August 2016. The second document listed in Annexure A is Mr. Mashaba's affidavit dated the 30th of November 2020 in response to Mr. Molefe's affidavit, in which, which he or his legal representative furnished to the Commission. Now, Chairperson, I should just add that that is the affidavit that was submitted pursuant to the 10.6 directive that was issued for him to respond to certain matters.
So he has previously complied with a 10.6 directive issued to him.
Yes.
For him to file a certain affidavit.
Yes.
He filed that,
Yes.
he complied.
Yes.
But now he's not complying with the summons.
No.
Yeah, okay.
And the third document is the report of the administration of the estates of Swifambo Rail Leasing and Liquidation and Rail Pro Holdings Proprietary Limited in liquidation dated the 18th of February, which was provided to you on the 4th of December 2020. I should just add, Chairperson, that the affidavit in which he responded, he responded to both these matters, Chairperson. Then, Chairperson, if I could go back to the terms of the summons, it said there in bold, your failure to comply with the requirements set out in paragraph A without sufficient cause constitute an offence under 6.1 of the Commissions Act of 1947 as amended, and it is dated the 9th of February, and it is signed by the Secretary of the Commission, Professor Musala.
Yes, no, that's fine. Will you just arrange for everybody to say will constitute an offense, not constitutes?
Yes, yes, yes. Sorry, Chairperson.
Yeah, and then the secretary should make sure. Yes, continue.
So that's the terms of the summons that was served on him, Chairperson. Now,
They tell him he's required to appear before the commission.
that's right.
They tell him the venue, the address where he must appear. They tell him what he must give evidence about and what he will be questioned about. It says it's matters arising from the affidavits listed in Annexure A or documents listed in Annexure A. It tells him the date, when to appear, it tells him the time. And it's issued by the Secretary of the Commission, and it is signed by the Secretary of the Commission. And it's clear from its heading that the summons is from the Commission.
It is.
It's got the logo of the Commission, on the face of on the first page. Yes, okay.
So Chairperson, on the face of it, nothing appears to be untoward or irregular about the summons that was served on him.
Yeah.
Now, Chairperson, you'll recall that the summons was served on him on the 10th, as recorded in the service document produced by the sheriff. That's
so obviously, well, where is the sheriff's return?
It's the first page, Chairperson.
Oh, that's the first one. Okay. In any event, it's clear from his attorney's letter that they received the summons. It's just that they say they don't regard it as a summons.
Yes, and they're not challenging the issue of service.
Yeah. And we don't know what it is that makes them think it's not a summons.
Yes. So 5 days after service of the summons on him, I should also add, Chairperson, just for completeness' sake, the summons was also emailed to the attorney who has been representing Mr. Mashaba for some time. So it was emailed to the attorney, and for safety's sake, there was service as well. Okay. Then, Chairperson, on the 15th of February, 5 days after the summons was served on Mr. Mashaba, Mr. Cameron, on his letterhead, this is Mr. Mashaba's attorney, writes to Ms. Rangata, who is a member of the legal team dealing with this matter and who has dealt with Mr. Cameron before. He says, he gives her as the reference, but he addresses the letter to the Secretary of the Commission. But I don't know why he says, dear Ms. Rangata. He then says, our client, Mr. Oswald Mashaba, document purporting to be a summons for the purposes of procuring our client's attendance before Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption, and fraud in the public sector, including organs of state, and in brackets, the inquiry, on the 24th of February 2021, the document. We address this communication to you on the instructions of our client with specific reference to the document, which clearly is a reference to the summons. He says, our client has instructed ourselves to record that, 1, he does not recognize and accept the lawfulness and or the legal validity of the document, and 2, Arising from that recordal referred to herein above, our client will not be attending the inquiry. And he then says, you are requested to acknowledge receipt hereof. Yours faithfully, Attorney Cameron. That letter is dated the 15th of February, Chairperson. On the 16th of February, the Secretary of the Commission wrote to Mr. Cameron in the following terms. On the Commission's letterhead to Mr. Cameron is addressed, and it was sent by email. It says, Dear Mr. Cameron, the Judicial Commission of Inquiry, into allegations of state capture, corruption, and fraud in the public sector, including organs of state, the Commission. Read your letter of 15 February 2021 in respect of the summons served on your client, Mr. Oswald Mashaba. 1. We note the contents of your letter under reply, which was sent to the Commission at 4:40 yesterday. Now, the relevance of the time, Chairperson, is reflected in paragraph 2, which reads, this is just about the time the Commission's hearing of yesterday was being finalized. 3, and just for context, Chairperson, the hearing is the hearing concerning Mr. Zuma's non-appearance. 3.
It is last week Monday.
Last week Monday, yes.
Yeah.
The Commission's legal team dealing with state capture at PRASA has requested me to bring to your attention and that of Mr. Mashaba, which I hereby do, that among the matters that emerged unequivocally at that hearing are the following. 3.1. A witness on whom a summons to appear at the Commission has been served is required to comply with the terms of the summons unless he or she has had it set aside by a competent court prior to the time he has been summoned to appear. 3.2. Unless the summons has been set aside, it is not open for a witness who is of the view that a summons is not lawful or legally valid to not comply with what the summons requires him or her to do. And 3.3, a witness who does not comply with the terms of a summons without sufficient cause is, in terms of Section 6 of the Commissions Act of 1947, in terms of which Act the summons was issued, guilty of an offence, and on conviction may be liable to imprisonment of up to 6 months. 4. In the light of the foregoing, the stance of the Commission's legal team on PRASA is that Mr. Mashaba is required to appear at the Commission on the 24th of February 2021 and comply with the other terms of the summons. Neither your letter nor its contents, which seemingly deliberately, boldly records only Mr. Mashaba's allegation that the summons is not lawful and legally valid, without setting aside the basis of that allegation, constitutes sufficient cause for him not to appear. 5, I also record that a copy of your letter, this response and further correspondence, if any, will be made available to the chairperson of the Commission. Now, it is in terms of that, Chairperson, that we wanted it to be known that these are the matters that will be placed before you today for a determination of what is to be done. Now, Chairperson, that letter was sent to Mr. Cameron on the 16th of February. I emphasize 2 points, Chairperson. It says to Mr. Cameron, we are telling you and your client. Now, we heard nothing from Mr. Cameron until yesterday evening. Mr. Ngata got a call from him, and then this morning we got this letter. This is the letter I've read, but just for completeness sake, Chairperson, because it is a response to our letter of the 17th. It says, the 16th. We address this communication to you on the instructions of our client with specific reference to the document and more specifically to the contents of your communication dated the 16th of February 2021. Says, as regards the contents of paragraph 3 of your communication, the recordals contained therein only came to the writer's attention on receipt of that communication. That is, same was not within the writer's knowledge when our communication dated the 15th of February was transmitted to you. Now, I don't know what the relevance of that is, because, and I'm saying that, Chairperson, because whatever was discussed at the Commission, the law remains the same. The law is he must comply with the summons. Mr. Cameron didn't have to be told by the Commission. It was just that the Commission was putting him and his client on terms that we are telling you that this is what Mr. Mashaba is required to do. And so that professed ignorance doesn't take the matter any further. 2, we request that you furnish ourselves with a transcribed record of what took place at that hearing, as we hold instructions for our client to seek an opinion from senior counsel. And then it says, in closing, we confirm and record our client will not be appearing at the Commission today, and more particularly for the reason that our client does not accept that the document constitutes a lawful and legally binding summons. Now, in response to that last paragraph, Chairperson, I make the point that in our letter, we say, but you just boldly state, and it appears to be deliberately so, that the summons is not binding and is not legally binding and is not lawful. It's an invitation. Tell us what's wrong, so that when this matter is debated this morning, we can determine whether there is any cogency in what your client is saying. Of course, that is as bold as the initial allegation and as bold as what Mr. Zuma's attorney said to you, Chairperson. Now, they then say we request acknowledgement of receipt hereof. But Chairperson, the question that arises is, what should the Commission do?
Well, this conduct by anybody, the conduct of defying a summons to appear before the Commission without having gone to court to have it set aside, if somebody thinks the summons is irregular or not valid, but simply to defy it and not appear before the Commission is totally unacceptable. And everything should be done by the Commission and the law enforcement agencies and everybody concerned to put a stop to it. Because if it spreads, it will be the beginning of chaos in our legal system.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That is what it will be.
Yes.
If it spreads, soon it will be happening in the magistrates' courts in various parts of our country. It will be happening in the various high courts throughout the country, because it would seem that sections in our society will be believing that it is acceptable conduct to simply defy a summons.
Let us not forget, Chairperson, the labor courts where
Yes.
the rights of the vulnerable,
Yes.
among the most vulnerable in our society,
Yes.
where an
Yes.
employer just defies a
Yeah.
summons to appear.
Yeah, employers in the labor court will defy when they are required to appear there. It's just going to mean chaos. The Secretary of the Commission is instructed to lay a criminal complaint against Mr. Oswald Mashaba for his failure to appear before the Commission today in accordance with the terms of the summons that had been served on him to appear before the Commission at 10 o'clock this morning. And the legal team is requested to assist the Secretary in preparing the necessary affidavit or statement to be lodged at the relevant police station. And that needs to be done urgently because this type of conduct cannot be allowed to go on without the legal process being put in motion to deal with it for too long. So that is what should happen. Yeah.
As you please, Chairperson. Chairperson, it is a pity, and I say that because on the objective facts, and that's the extent to which the Commission's investigations are being hampered by Mr. Mashaba's non-appearance. Chairperson, on the evidence, on his own version as set out in the affidavits he has submitted, Mr. Mashaba does not dispute that he was in charge of Sufambo when it was awarded the contract. Chairperson, you'll also recall that Mr. Molefe gave evidence about a meeting between Mr. Mashaba and himself, where Mr. Mashaba said he knew that the Hawks were investigating the matter and that he wanted, in a sense, to come clean. He then said that he'd been approached by Mr. Mabunda to be the front for the company that would be awarded the contract. In his response, and that was Mr. Molefe's replying affidavit in the Sufambo High Court application, which we've referred to many times, which judgment of the High Court setting aside the award as being corrupt was endorsed by the Supreme Court of Appeal, and the Constitutional Court, having looked at the application for leave to appeal, refused to grant leave to appeal. So what we have, Chairperson, is concerns by the highest courts in the land about a 3.5 billion rand contract. Now, among the allegations made about Mr. Mashaba, Chairperson, is that he was aware that, he didn't have the requisite skills and so on. He became a front for a Spanish company, which was then awarded the contract. The amount that has been paid in respect of that contract, Chairperson, for 70 locomotives is more than 2.6 billion rand. In return, our country has received 13 locomotives. I say all of this, Chairperson, as a precursor to our next witness who investigated this matter.
But also it's important to say it so that the public understands that the witness who has defined the summons had been called about this very important transaction relating to Swifambo.
Yes, yes, and that's the point, that at the end of the day, there is no dispute even from him that he was involved. He didn't even file, as Mr. Molefe said, he didn't even file the answering affidavit in the High Court. He only filed an affidavit in response to the replying affidavit of Mr. Molefe. Now, all of that, Chairperson, is commented upon both by the High Court and the Supreme Court of Appeal. In other words, he would have thrown a great deal of light on what happened. With an allegation being made that...
1 second, Mr. Son, I just realized that my phone was not off. And in this way, I'm reminding everybody to put their own off. Yes.
So what we have, Chairperson, is somebody who could throw light to the public as to how it came about that a contract worth eventually 3.5 billion rand, although 2.78 has been paid, a billion has been paid. How is it that that could happen? He would have been able to throw light. And Chairperson, the long-suffering public has a right to know how its hard-earned rands are being wasted away in contracts of this nature. Where did that money go to? There are allegations that are made that he in fact says so in his 10.6, Chairperson, which I will refer you to. He, in a document attached to his 10.6, says that I was forced to pay money to people who said they were collecting money for the ANC. And I agreed to pay 80 million rand. He says so. But he says, I don't know if the ANC received it. The person to whom I gave the money says he didn't give it to the ANC. But that's not the point. The point is he says that I paid that. Now, if that is not corruption on his part, whoever else may be involved, one wants to know what is. And especially with a contract, as the next witness will show, is so fraught with difficulties. And when one looks at how the money was distributed through Mr. Mashaba's companies, one shudders to think how all of this could have gone on from 2017 when this report was sent to the Hawks. And today, there is not a single person that has been arrested. And so Mr. Mashaba's presence, Chairperson, would have allayed some of those concerns. Now, I know he says in previous correspondence, and he says in his 10.6 affidavit, that the liquidator has laid charges against me, and the liquidator indeed has. And I don't want to implicate myself. But the Constitutional Court in the Zuma matter made it very clear that the right against self-incrimination is a right that must be exercised in relation to specific questions. It's not a blanket right which entitles the person to say, not only not to come, but to say, I'm not going to answer any questions. It responded to what Mr. Zuma's legal representative had said to you, Chairperson, that we will put Mr. Zuma in the court, in the witness box, and he won't say anything, and the Constitutional Court said you can't. So that is why Mr. Mashaba's presence today would have assisted so much in one's understanding of what went on in the Swifambo contract. But I want to say something more, Chairperson. One of the reasons we have the person who conducted the forensic investigation for PRASA and who submitted a 112-page report to the Hawks, who initially told him that they're going to look at this and they'll probably ask him to do a report on Siangena as well. But after he submitted his report, he never came back to him. Now, why that is relevant, Chairperson, is this is a forensic report that does two things. It looks at all the issues that were raised in the court papers. That's the advantage one has. And it looks at, when you look at the money, what the investigator did was what he calls a first level review, which is looking at the money, the flow of money from PRASA to Swifambo, and from Swifambo to different people. And what he shows you are all the links. And when you put the whole picture together, it all makes sense. Because you ask yourself when the evidence is being led, but why was this company paid this amount? And having regard to the allegations, it all makes sense. And the picture emerges from the report, but at least Mr. Mashaba would have been given an opportunity to explain whether the picture we think that emerges is a correct picture. And that is what the Commission is about. Mr. Chairperson, again, I'm still dealing with Mr. Mashaba. You might remember that the Constitutional Court, when it required Mr. Zuma to appear, and he didn't appear last Monday, made this point that commissions serve different purposes. But one of the purposes of this commission is to allay public concerns about a matter that has worried the public for the last 10 years at least. The extent to which our state entities and government departments have been corrupted and effectively, in certain instances, captured. Now, the public, what Mr. Mashaba is doing is denying the public its right to know what happened in this matter, which on all versions he is involved in. Whether good or bad is irrelevant. But he has to come and explain to the public and explain to you, Chairperson, who has to make a report to the Commission. That is the brief you've been given by the President. So the non-appearance of Mr. Mashaba is a very serious inroad into the Commission's attempt to fulfill its mandate to let the public know. And that is an added reason and an aggravating factor that when we are assisting the Secretary of the Commission, we will be putting in the request that the Secretary makes to the law enforcement authorities.
Okay, no, thank you.
Mr. Chairperson, then I'm in a position to call my first witness for the day, Chairperson.
Who was going to be your second? Your first witness, now that Mr. Mashaba is not here, or was he already going to be?
Mr. Mashaba was going to be the first witness.
Yes.
And then we were going to call, yes, who was going to be the second witness.
Yes. Okay. You don't need any to set up, you are ready, so I don't need
Perhaps,
to adjourn.
perhaps if you just gave us 5 minutes because Mr.
Okay.
Sacks can...
Okay, all right. Or should we just take this time for the tea
It
agenda?
may be, it may be most convenient,
so that when we come back
and go once.
Yeah. Okay, we'll take the tea adjournment now instead of 11:15, and we'll come back at 11:15.
As you please.
We adjourn.
1, 2, and 2.
Yes, Mr. Soni.
As you please. Chairperson, before we call Mr. Sacks, may I just place on record, I've been told that 2,861 processes have been issued by the Commission.
Someone says,
Summonses, yes.
oh, that's a very high number.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And it's for appearance and for documents.
And for documents,
Yes.
okay. Thank you.
May we call our
Yes,
first
please
witness,
administer the oath or affirmation.
Please state your full names for the record. Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath? Do you consider the oath binding on your
I'm
conscience?
sorry. Please speak up so that it will be recorded. Start afresh, please.
Please state your full names for the record.
Ryan Marc Sacks.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No, I don't.
Do you consider the oath binding on your conscience?
Yes, I do.
Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
You may be seated.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Mr. Sacks, keep your mask off because it muffles the recording.
Thank you, Council.
Mr. Sacks, what is your profession?
I am a chartered accountant, Chairperson.
And in terms of the nature of the work you do?
Chairperson, I specialize in forensic auditing investigations, in supporting civil and law enforcement investigations.
You have before you your curriculum vitae, is that correct?
That's correct, Chairperson.
Chairperson, we unfortunately didn't include this in the bundle we gave you just for reference purposes. Can I hand it up and we can put it as
Okay.
at the end of Mr. I just want him to confirm it. I don't think I need to go into it in detail. It's just for recording purposes. And we could include it, Chairperson, at the end of the report itself rather than the annexures, or perhaps the end of the affidavit, Chairperson. That may be a better place to include it, which would then make it 726.1 and 2. The bundle L, page 726, 1 and 2. Mr. Sacks, do you confirm the... Oh,
You will arrange for it to be numbered properly.
I will.
Did you say it is or it is not an annexure to the affidavit?
I thought we would just include it as an... it isn't at the moment.
It's a standalone document?
Yes.
Okay, so it will need to be an exhibit, is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Is the report an annexure to the affidavit?
It is.
Because if the report is an annexure to the affidavit, then, and this letter is a standalone document, then it should not be between the affidavit and the report.
Yes. Yes.
It should rather be after the report.
As you please, Chairperson. Then can we make it 954.1 and .2? The report itself is
Goes up to
RS3.
954.
Yes.
And the document at 955 is not part of the report?
No.
Okay, all right. So we'll change what we wrote earlier on, and it will be 954.1 and 5, 4.2. Okay, all right. At the right time, then we'll need to admit it as an exhibitor.
Yes. Mr. Sacks, do you confirm the correctness of what's contained in?
Yes, I do, Chairperson.
And how many years of experience do you have in forensic investigation?
I have 15 years' experience, Mr. Chairperson.
Now, one of the matters that you are investigating is the VBS investigations.
That's correct, Chairperson.
And in regard to PRASA, what investigations were you involved?
Chairperson.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sonny and Mr. Sacks. Did you forget that we admit his affidavit, Mr. Sonny?
No, I was just, sorry, but perhaps I should do that. I was going to.
Go to the report,
yes.
yeah.
Mr. Sacks, in regard to the investigation you did for PRASA, what was it in relation to Swafamba?
Chairperson, initially I was appointed by Worksman's attorneys to assist in the investigation occurring at PRASA. Thereafter, I was appointed by the DPCI, the Hawks, as the forensic accountant to investigate the Swafamba investigation.
And you then prepared an affidavit and report based on those investigations?
That is correct, Chairperson.
Now, there is an affidavit which appears in Bundle L from page 720 to 726. Is that your affidavit?
Please bear with me, Chairperson.
You look at the black numbers on the left-hand corner for
Yes,
page numbers.
I've got it, Chairperson. Yes, I confirm this is my affidavit, Chairperson.
Okay.
Right. Now, in relation to this affidavit, there is a signature on page 725. Whose signature is that?
That is my signature, Chairperson.
Do you confirm that's what's... So is this your affidavit?
Yes, Chairperson, this is my affidavit.
You confirm what's contained in this affidavit is true and correct?
Yes, Chairperson, it's true and correct.
Now, attached to this affidavit as one of the annexures, and you will see that that appears at paragraph 11 of your affidavit, you say you prepared a report, and that report is annexed as RS3.
That is correct, Chairperson.
Is it correct that RS3 appears from page 843, and that's just the report itself, to 954?
What are the page numbers?
Oh, sorry, Chairperson. It's 843.
Yes.
Up to 954.
I take it's the same as what starts at page 727.
So I was going to, I in fact asked that that be removed from your file because it's exactly
Yes.
the same document. And the only reason we removed, I was asked for the first one to be removed is because it's not marked Annexure RS.
Yes.
But it is exactly the same document.
Yes.
I don't know why it was produced twice.
Is the report the last document in the bundle? Or there are other documents?
They are,
Annexures to the report.
They are annexures to the report.
So if you removed the last one, if there are two, and then marked this one, the first one, is it S3 or whatever?
The RS3.
Yes, would that not help with the pagination in the sense that if you remove the one that starts the first one, you might have a gap in terms of the pagination.
Chairperson, this is the difficulty.
Yeah,
In everybody's file,
yeah,
RS3 starts at 843. So I initially marked the first one. It's just when I saw that
yes.
the annexure is marked RS3 and it's referred to in the affidavit. It doesn't matter, but for my purposes now, Chairperson, it's going to be more convenient to take out the first one.
Yes. Okay, well, we can do that. Then what should be done is a page should be inserted there, which should make a note to say there was a
duplication.
report that was a duplication.
Yes.
And it's been removed. It was from page whatever to whatever, yes. So that whoever reads then understands the pagination.
Yes, I had given that instruction.
Yes, okay.
I'm sorry about that.
Okay, no, that's fine. Okay. All right. Have we reached a stage where you ask me to admit the affidavits?
Yes. Well, let me just ask him if he confirms the correctness of the report, Chairperson.
Yeah, okay.
So RS3 is your report, is that correct?
Yes, it is, Chairperson.
Do you confirm what's contained in the report is true and correct?
Yes, Chairperson, I confirm it.
Yes.
Chairperson, then I ask leave to admit Mr. Ryan's affidavit as Exhibit SS24, together with the annexures to the affidavit, but in particular RS3, which is the report.
The affidavit of Mr. Ryan Marc Sacks, starting at page 720, is admitted together with its annexures and will be marked as Exhibit SS24.
As you please, Chairperson. Now, Mr. Sacks, you said you'd been initially commissioned or engaged by Werksmans to do the investigation into the Swafambo matter. I know the Werksmans matter was wider, but in regard to that, the investigation into Swafambo, you then said that the Hawks had asked you to do the investigation. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chairperson. I was officially mandated by the Hawks in late December 2015 to perform the Swafambo investigation.
Yes. Just remember to adjust or bring the mic closer, Mr. Sony, and speak up a bit.
Yes. Now, I'm raising that because you've asked me to place on record that you didn't want to give evidence before the Hawks had been informed that you would be giving evidence on this matter, isn't that so?
That's correct, Chairperson.
And I just want to place on record that the Hawks have been told that Mr. Sacks would be giving evidence on this matter, and they're aware of the report as well as the nature of his evidence, Chairperson. And it's just that we didn't want to create a problem on this issue, because you will realize the sensitivity of what you might remember. Mr. Molefe had to go to court to get the Hawks to investigate. But there are developments that perhaps Mr. Sacks will deal with in the course of his evidence, Chairperson. Now, let's just deal with your affidavit, first of all. You say in paragraph 4 that you were caused to appear here by virtue of a summons that was served on you. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chairperson.
And why did you want that procedure to be followed?
Chairperson, the report that I produced is very confidential in nature. I was prepared for the Hawks. Accordingly, I required the summons to allow myself to attend these proceedings to divulge the contents of my findings.
Then at paragraph 6, you set out how you became involved in the investigations, and you say that you'd initially been engaged by Werksmans to do the wider PRASA investigation. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chairperson. We were engaged to perform the forensic auditing aspect of the investigation that Werksmans attorneys were appointed for by PRASA.
Now, just so that there's no confusion about names, at that time you were called a different entity. What were you called by at that time?
Chairperson, at that time my company was called Crowe Forensics SA Limited, and as a result of global branding changes by Crowe International, we are now called Crowe Forensics SA Limited.
It's the same.
Chairperson, the same company.
And then in paragraph 7, you make the point that you were then appointed by the Hawks to do the investigation. Just ask you, to do that, you had to sign certain confidentiality agreements, and they appear as RS1 and RS2.
That is correct, Chairperson.
And that was the reason why you wanted a summons and why you asked the Commission to inform the Hawks about your appearance.
That's correct, Chairperson.
Now let's just deal with your initial dealings with the Hawks. Could you just tell the Chairperson what was indicated would happen after this report? You deal with it in paragraph 8.
Chairperson, I was appointed to perform the Swifambo forensic accounting investigation. It was also anticipated at the time that I would be appointed by the Hawks to perform a forensic accounting investigation into Siangena Technologies, and that appointment never transpired, then or subsequent to the time I was dealing with the Swifambo matter.
Now, at that time, who in the Hawks was heading the team looking at these matters?
When I was appointed, General Masipi was my understanding was the head who confirmed my appointment to do Swifambo. Later, a General Kana replaced the General Masipi, and during his tenure, as far as I'm aware, during that time, I wasn't appointed to do the Siangena Technologies forensic investigation.
Can I just have some time frames? When were you appointed by the Hawks? If you look at paragraph 7, you give the date.
28 December 2015, I was appointed by the Hawks chairperson to do the Swifambo investigation.
Sounds an odd day, and I just say that in passing. It looked like they wanted to get on with it between Christmas and New Year.
That's my understanding too, chairperson.
All right. And then when did you say General Kana took over? About when was that?
I'm not, chairperson, familiar with the actual dates he took over, but I was present at a meeting on or around April 2016, chairperson, where I attended the premises, the headquarters of the Hawks, where amongst many other investigation team members, General Kana headed the meeting. And one of the topics of discussion was the appointment of Crowe Forensics at the time, Crowe Forensics now, to do the Siangena Technologies forensic investigation as over and above Swifambo.
Now that's 16 months after your initial appointment.
It was
April 2017?
April 2016. It was, chairperson, that date's not included in my affidavit regarding that meeting. But again, I was appointed December 2015 for Swifambo. The meeting I refer to occurred in April 2016, give or take 4 months later.
Now, you then say that you were asked to make a presentation at a meeting with the Hawks.
That is correct, Chairperson. To jump in time, so December 2015, I was appointed to do Swifambo. April 2016 is the said meeting I refer to with General Kana. In March 2017, to the best of my recollection, I had a meeting with the Hawks at one of their offices in Pretoria to discuss the Swifambo investigation. At that point, it was communicated to me that a report would be required, if I may divulge, Council. In April 2017, I received an email from the Hawks to ask for a meeting to discuss my findings to date. As the Hawks, I was advised that the Hawks were meeting with the NPA, the prosecution, the team responsible for Swifambo, and they wanted to obtain my findings for that meeting with the NPA. That was 11 April 2017, if I stand to be corrected. On the 19th of April 2017, so now it's a few days later, I indeed met with the Hawks, with Brigadier Makinyana and Colonel Magabosha, if I recall, those were the members of the Hawks team, in which I handed over my report, which forms part of my affidavit, and that report is dated 20 April 2017. I recall I had to make one change, which I emailed through to the Hawks. And Chairperson, that was the last communication I had with the Hawks on this matter.
2017.
Yes, Chairperson.
And they've not been in touch with you in any way?
Subsequent to the issue of my report, I have not received any communication from the Hawks regarding the specific reports I gave to them.
Okay.
So just so that there's no dispute about it, the report that you gave to the Hawks on the 20th of April is the same report that appears at as Annexure RS3 to your affidavit.
Yes, Chairperson, that is correct. This is the latest and most recent version of my report, dated 20 April 2017. It has not been updated or amended subsequent to this date.
I see that in paragraph 10 of your affidavit, you refer to a draft preliminary report.
Yes,
That's
Chairperson.
not this one, or is it this one?
Chairperson, the reason why I refer to it as draft preliminary is because we were in the midst of a very comprehensive investigation, which I'm sure Council will lead me into the contents of that investigation. And the report, I advised the Hawks at that time that the findings are preliminary. As is the nature of investigation, I was still awaiting further information to complete my investigation. And the findings contained in this report were very crucial because it confirmed the flow of funds from PRASA to Swifambo and how Swifambo utilized that money. The next anticipated round of investigation was to assess and investigate the recipients of that money and what they did, how they utilized that money, essentially PRASA's money.
Just again to confirm, the report that appears at RS3 is that same report. It's just that you still call it a draft preliminary report because you haven't taken it to the second level, which we'll get to in a moment.
That is correct, Chairperson.
But is the position that despite the report being labeled as a draft preliminary report in terms of this paragraph 10, I haven't looked at it again to see whether those words appear on it, is the position that, as far as you are concerned, the report represents your final findings, or not really?
No, it doesn't present my final findings. there was additional matters to investigate and confirm.
Yes.
As my report alludes to certain transactions that I required further information for, certain allegations and suspicions that we had, that I required the assistance of the Hawks to provide me with further information to confirm the flow of funds. So to summarize, this is still very much a preliminary report. Why it was draft report is because I hadn't received any comments and I was from the Hawks, and I was still awaiting further information, which I clarified clearly in my report what was required to complete a final first level report, which I noted in this report was first level. Without getting into technicalities, first level in my mind was flow of funds from PRASA to Swifambo to who Swifambo paid. The second level required was those parties who received money from Swifambo, how they distributed the money or what they did with the money. Because the suspicions or allegations at the time was that the money was not for commercial, or there's no business rationale for the disbursements of funds from Swifambo to these entities or individuals, and then from how those entities and individuals utilized that money. And Council and I will deal with that as it's dealt with in my report, Chairperson.
But is the position that the reason why the report is not final is the reason that because there was some further work to be done in regard to certain aspects that you were officials of your investigation, but there are some findings that do not need any further work to be done, but others still need further work? Or is the position that the entire report is still work in progress?
Chairperson, you are correct in your first point. Certain findings are final and certain findings are still subject to further investigation. Hence, it was still a draft report. I just required specifically just a bit more information for my first round of investigation in order to call a final. But you are correct. Some findings were final, some findings were subject to further investigation.
Mr. Soni?
As you please. I'll just elaborate on that issue, Chairperson, because I understand the difficulty. I perhaps should have canvassed it a little more. Mr. Sacks, when you were appointed by the Hawks in December 2015, so PRASA had already filed its application in the High Court, is that correct? I think they filed it in November 2015.
Chairperson, if you just indulge with me, I'll put those dates in my report.
That's fine.
That is correct, Chairperson. Council is correct regarding the civil application.
But between that time, December 2015, and the time you sent this report to the Hawks, were the Hawks assisting you with the investigations you were doing? When I say assisting, providing assistance that you wanted, like 205s to banks and so on, Section 205 applications to banks and so on.
Chairperson, the Hawks were assisting in terms of providing bank statements we required in terms of Section 205 subpoenas, which was the foundation of my report in April 2017, and I required further information. By its very nature, flow of funds analysis across an array of bank accounts is quite detailed work requiring a lot of information. So this report was, I guess, at a juncture where we had enough information to conclude on certain findings, as Chairperson you so referred to. However, I required more information to confirm certain other findings. So, to answer Council's question, between 2015 and April 2017, I had received assistance from the policeman, the police colonel who was assisting me in providing this information. Subsequent to the issue of my report, I didn't receive any further information, which I requested and which I required.
So, you gave the Hawks your draft preliminary report. They knew that it was not a final report in terms of it as a whole. They knew that you still needed to do some further work in regard to some features of the investigation. And you gave them this draft report on the 19th of April 2017, according to paragraph 10. Up to now, they've never come back to you to ask you to complete the parts of the investigation that you wanted to complete. Is that right?
That is absolutely correct, Chairperson.
And in a few weeks' time, it will be 4 years since you gave them, because next week it's March, then after that it's April. So in a few weeks' time, it will be 4 years since you gave the Hawks your report, and they've never come back to enable you to complete the investigation.
That is correct, Chairperson.
And they've never said to you if there's any problem.
I haven't heard one word regarding any problems, Chairperson.
Yes. And you wouldn't be aware if, for whatever reason, they decided that somebody else must complete the investigation. I don't know if it would make sense, but you have never heard of anything like that?
No, Chairperson, I haven't.
Yes. Okay, all right. And was there any stage where they might have been unhappy with how you were going about the investigation or anything?
Chairperson, I'm not aware of anything to that effect.
They never raised any issues?
And nothing was communicated to me at all.
Okay, all right.
When you met them in April 2017, what impression did you get? Well, sorry, did you present your report on the 19th of April?
That is correct, Chairperson.
And what impression did you get after you presented your report?
Chairperson, in my view, my key takeaway from that meeting was there was a general lack of interest into what I was explaining in the meeting. Specifically, I specifically recall in my report contained one exhibit which summarized in totality the flow of funds. I tried to summarize it as best as possible into one page that could catch the attention of a reader of this report. And on presentation of this one pager, where it was very clear as to who was receiving money from Swifambo, my takeaway from that meeting was that there was no real interest in what I was telling the recipients, participants and recipients of my report in that meeting.
Who was the leader of the Hawks team to whom you presented the report?
If you indulge me, I just want to get...
General Kana?
No, General Kana was not present in that meeting.
Yes.
I recall it was a Brigadier Makinyana.
Yes.
There were a few members of the Hawks team. The Brigadier Makinyana, there's a Colonel Magabosha. I recall maybe one or two lower level policemen.
But at that time, the person to whom you were supposed to report, was it General Kana or was it somebody else?
It was Brigadier Makinyana who, I was never officially introduced personally to say this is the person, your point person. But through the correspondent, I ascertained it was a Brigadier Makinyana who is responsible for the Swifambo investigation and I would for overseeing the Swifambo investigation.
Yes. Okay, all right. Mr.
Yes,
Sonny.
please. Now, in paragraph 8, you talk about a General Mosipi, where you say that you got the impression in your meetings with him or meeting with him that your next brief would be the Siangena matter.
That is correct, Chairperson.
When was the last time you met General Mosipi?
Chairperson, to correct counsel, I've never met General Mosipi. I do understand that it was under his instruction the investigation would occur. In 2015, I was appointed through correspondence by the DPCR under the head of General Mosipi to do Swifambo. Between that date and April 2016, General Kana had replaced General Mosipi. So I personally was not involved in those higher level delegations of the investigations. I dealt with the Hawks policemen responsible for the investigations. And besides that one meeting which I referred to in April 2016, where General Kana presided over that meeting, that was my only interaction with what I would call the authorities of the Hawks. However, in order to maintain impartial, I didn't get involved in those discussions about who's going to appoint or how the investigation is going to run. I am an independent expert. I get appointed by the Hawks to do my work, and I prepare an independent expert report, which I had done in this case and presented to the Hawks on April 2017.
Now, when you were asked to present to the Hawks in April 2017, what did you understand the purpose of that presentation was?
Chairperson, I was communicated by Colonel Magabosha to say they require my preliminary findings as the Hawks were meeting with the NPA on around that time. Accordingly, they required my preliminary findings as part of their discussions with the NPA.
And you've then indicated that, to the chairperson that you didn't find much enthusiasm in regard to your presentation.
That was my takeaway, Chairperson, from my engagements at that time.
Now, in your report, before we deal with the report itself, we talked about bank statements. In order for you as a private investigator to secure bank statements of state entities or individuals, what process would have to be followed?
Chairperson, I am not party to the process of obtaining those bank statements. It has to, as a subpoena process, which the police themselves have to serve Section 205 subpoenas on financial institutions obtaining those required bank statements. In the ordinary course of the forensic investigation, I would identify specific transactions requiring investigation. I would advise the police to say this is a transaction or a bank account I require, and the police themselves would prepare such subpoenas and obtain them and provide the subpoenaed bank statements to my officers directly. And I keep a record of those bank statements because for chain of evidence, those bank statements would form part of my ultimate deliverable and evidence in a criminal proceedings.
All the bank statements that you refer to and you annex to your affidavit were obtained for you by the police.
That is correct, Chairperson.
In your report, and we'll go through it in a little while, you mention the following, that there are certain bank statements, certain bank accounts you've had looks at. These were the main bank accounts of Swifambo Leasing and Swifambo Holdings, but there were certain bank accounts for example, I think you mentioned a Bidvest account, that were apparently in the name of these entities, which you still require?
That is correct, Chairperson. As a result of still requiring a bank statement, hence my report was preliminary. Until I received these bank accounts, I couldn't conclude for all transactions. As we will see, my report contains hundreds of transactions, some which I could conclude on, and some which required further information to conclude on.
Now, just to be clear as to what you had and what you didn't have, you had all the statements that you required from the main bank accounts of Swifambo Holdings and Swifambo Leasing. Would that be correct? The main bank account?
Chairperson, that is correct. The main bank accounts for Swifambo Holdings and Swifambo Leasings formed the basis for the majority of the investigation. And the bank account, in this case, this Bidvest bank account, was confirmatory of a payment that I knew where it had gone to. I just, for chain of evidence, I just needed that bank account to confirm. But I was able to conclude on significant inflows and outflows of the Swifambo Holdings and Swifambo Leasing bank accounts as I had that information.
Now, the bank statements in respect of those accounts that you didn't have, did you ask the police to issue 205s, Section 205s in respect of them?
Chairperson, it was, as best described, it's a fluid process. Due to the vast amount of bank statements or bank accounts we require, we had received quite a few. However, there were some that were still outstanding, subpoenas that had been issued that had not been collected from the financial institutions by the police, as well as further subpoenas required. In the time that I was allowed to perform my investigation, I guess it could be best considered as 1/2 or 1/3 of the investigation had been performed due to the high value of rands, billions or 1.8, 2.6 billion rand. There, as one could imagine, there's a lot of bank accounts underpinning the flow of funds. Hence, there was certainly going to be further bank accounts to be requested, which that process wasn't completed.
And you make that clear in your report, that in order to finalize certainly the level 1 investigation, you would require those statements in respect of those bank accounts.
That is correct, Chairperson.
And that never came after, that you were never asked whether you still require it after you had submitted your report?
That is correct, Chairperson.
Now, you say the Hawks were to meet the NPA. In regard to criminal investigation, you were engaged by the Hawks. You are doing the VBS investigations. Do you have any communications directly with the NPA? Would they come to you and ask your opinion on things?
Chairperson, the best way to put it is whenever I prepare a report, in this case for VBS, a sworn statement, I most certainly engage with the NPA to finalize and settle these statements. There is a continuous engagement on a regular basis with the NPA.
Did the NPA ever contact you in regard to your preliminary report on Swifambo?
Chairperson, I don't recall ever being contacted directly by the NPA, certainly not to the extent that I would expect to have consulted with prosecuting authorities in such a arena such as a Swifambo report.
But were there any communications between yourself and the NPA?
Not that I recall, Chairperson.
Now, you say in paragraph paragraph 13 that the report was still being finalized, but you had completed your analysis in regard to the payment received and made in respect of about 2.6 billion rand.
That is correct, Chairperson.
Now, we don't need to go into exact figures. How much did PRASA pay in respect of the Swifambo contract? And it's just a ballpark figure.
2.6 billion rand, Chairperson.
And to whom did it make those payments?
Chairperson, PRASA made those payments to Swifambo Holdings and Swifambo Leasing.
Your report deals with those. Are they related companies?
Chairperson, Swifambo Holdings is the holding company for Swifambo Leasing.
And who are the main persons involved with Swifambo Holdings and Swifambo Leasing?
Chairperson, to my understanding, Mr. Oswald Mashaba was the main person running Swifambo Holdings, Swifambo Rail Leasing. There were additional directors per CRPC of those entities, but from the information that was available to me, it appeared that Mr. Mashaba was the person running the companies.
If the Hawks came back to you now to say, look, please finalize your report, is there still a lot of work to be done? I'm just talking about the first level part.
Chairperson, for the first level part, no, not much work would be done. Again, the first level part would be confirming the flow of funds, the payments or utilization of money out of the Swifambo bank accounts to those recipients. That does not require a lot of work. That was clear in my report. What would require a bit more substantive work, Chairperson, was those recipients of the money from Swifambo, what they did with it and where that money went. It's a process of obtaining further bank statements to confirm those flow of funds.
Now, we know that Annexure RS3 is your report, which is the third annexure to your affidavit. Then there are further annexures, RS41 to RS4.4. What are those? Just in brief.
Chairperson, those are the Swifambo Rail Leasing and Swifambo Rail Holding bank statements.
Those are the ones that you used for your level 1 analysis.
That's correct, Chairperson.
Mr. Soni, I know that when we took the tea break, I said the purpose was so that when we started with Mr. Sacks would go right through, but there is a need for us to. Oh, there is a need for us to take a short adjournment.
As you please, Chairperson.
We'll just take 10 minutes adjournment.
As you please.
We adjourn.
Yes.
Okay, let's proceed. Just remember, Mr. Soni, that you are competing with the echo noise.
Yes.
So
yes,
try and
yes.
speak up.
I need to,
Yeah.
yes.
I've been told that the aircon, you either switch it off or it's just like this. And I'm told that sometimes on your side, it's much hotter, it seems, than this side. I don't know why. So sometimes I don't feel that it's so hot, but I hear that it's hot on that side of the room. So let's see what we can do.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Sacks, we were talking about RS41 to RS 4.1 to RS 4.4. Those are the supporting documents that you received from the bank.
Yes, Chairperson. Amongst a few other bank accounts, these were the main Swifambo, Rail Leasings and Rail Holdings bank statements.
Oh. And then in Annex RS5, you set out the list of documents that you had.
Yes, that is correct, Chairperson.
And you say in paragraphs 18 and 19 that that document is contained in about 20 arch leave of files, and you haven't annexed them.
That is correct, Chairperson.
Chairperson, having regard to the contents of the report, they are not going to serve any purpose before the Commission.
Yeah.
All right, let's then go to your report, Mr. Sacks. And I just want to say, because it may be helpful, that you, in your index, set out the headings under which the report has been drafted.
That is correct, Chairperson.
All right. Now, we don't need to deal with one because you've indicated that this is especially for the Hawks, and it has a measure of confidentiality about it.
That is correct,
Right.
Chairperson.
And then you set out the background to the investigation, and there are two matters that constitute, or there are several matters that constitute the.
Well, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Soni. I do note, Mr. Sec, that your report, RS3, is not marked draft or preliminary, or have I missed that? Oh, there it is, draft preliminary report. I saw, much, the first line says report 4 without saying preliminary or draft. Yes. But I see later on down the page, you've got draft preliminary report. Okay. All right.
And you make the point on that same page, Mr. Sacks, that this report is for discussion purposes only. And that, I take it, arises from the fact that you'd been asked to appear with the Hawks on the 19th for the purposes of discussing the report. But there was no discussion thereafter.
That is correct, Chairperson.
At that meeting, I take it that you took those who were present, who were attending the meeting, through the report, at least in terms of the main features. Is that right?
That is correct, Chairperson.
Okay, all right.
And you indicated what is set out in the report, namely that you've looked at the fund or the flow of funds from PRASA to the two Swifambo entities, and then from the Swifambo entities to other individuals or entities.
That is correct, Chairperson.
And you made it clear that it was based on the bank statements that they had procured for you.
That is correct, Chairperson.
Now, you say that this was, the report came about as a result of the appointment of Swifambo to, or the award of a tender to Swifambo by PRASA.
That is correct, Chairperson.
All right. And then you refer to a Hillbrow case number, and you indicate that the complainant was Mr. Mamabolo.
That is correct, Chairperson.
Now, just for context sake, is he the Mr. Mamabolo who accompanied Mr. Molefe to this meeting with Mr. Mashaba in July 2015?
That is my understanding, Chairperson.
And did you have the affidavits he had, or the statements he had made in support of his criminal complaint?
I had access to those affidavits, Chairperson.
And you relied on them as well?
Yes, Chairperson, where relevant.
Yes. And then you had the Auditor General's report of the 31st of March dealing with fruitless and wasteful expenditure.
Yes, that is correct, Chairperson.
In relation to the Swifambo matter.
Yes, Chairperson. I must add that the Auditor General's report and Mr. Mamabolo's affidavit is all cursory background information. The focus of my investigation was purely on the bank records of Swifambo, and where relevant, if those other pieces of information could augment my findings, I would use it.
Yes, yes.
Yes, Chairperson.
What, though, you do in your report, and just correct me if I'm wrong, and why all of this is important is, you try and correlate the various complaints that were made with the flow of funds to and from Swifambo.
Yes. So, Chairperson, the best way to explain it is the Swifambo contract is obviously it's of high value. There's quite a story from the moment it was incepted to ultimate signature and then flow of funds. I took it upon myself in preparing this report, which wouldn't form an affidavit in criminal proceedings. This is a report of findings for the Hawks. I thought it would be beneficial to the Hawks to actually summarize all the civil pleadings, because it puts out and explains clearly how the whole tender came about, who the parties were to the tender, what the irregularities were to the tender, so that when the police could read the flow of funds, they could get context and it would make sense. If I just prepared a report of flow of funds without the story that led up to the money going from PRASA to Swifambo, it wouldn't have been as beneficial as or useful to the police. And I thought that obviously due to the volume of civil papers underpinning the application to set the contract aside, I included all the applicable findings in those affidavits, Mr. Molefe and Mr. Mazzaro's affidavits, in this report, but my findings are the flow of funds, the money. That was my detailed findings. That is what I was providing an expert opinion on.
But what it does is that anybody reading the report is going to say, well, this money went to company X. And if you look at the allegations are made, you say it probably went because of that allegation.
It connects the dots, Chairperson.
Then we've already dealt with how you came to be appointed and so on, so we can leave that. And then that's paragraph 3, the rest of paragraph 2 and paragraph 3. Now, in paragraph 4, you introduce, or you say that that's an introduction to the investigation. Could you briefly summarize what the purpose of this investigation was, and what were you trying to achieve with this? I know you've said part of it, but just in relation to that question.
Chairperson, my mandate was to perform a flow of funds analysis of the Swifambo bank accounts. So Swifambo, I say collectively, being Swifambo Rail Holdings and Swifambo Rail Leasing. My objective was to analyze how the money from PRASA flowed to Swifambo and what that money was used for, how it was utilized. So that my mandate was to do the analysis. My objective was to give an opinion on those findings of the 2.6 billion rand specifically.
And to look at whether there were unusual payments or the timing was unusual. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that is correct, Chairperson.
And then in paragraph 5, you deal with the scope and methodology. So we're talking about the bank accounts that you looked at, and which the details of which you got through the Hawks via Section 205 subpoenas issued to the financial institutions. Now, you looked at mainly 2 bank accounts. Could you tell the chairperson which those were?
Chairperson, the 2 main bank accounts was a Swifambo Rail Leasing standard bank account number 022682570 and the Swifambo Rail Holdings standard bank account number 202538117.
And why did you choose those 2 accounts?
Chairperson, I chose those 2 accounts because those were the 2 bank accounts into which PRASA made payments for the Swifambo contract. Specifically, the contract states that the payments should be made to Swifambo Rail Leasing. However, payments were also made to Swifambo Rail Holdings, specifically the first payment, which was an irregularity in terms of what the contract stated between PRASA and Swifambo.
And that's why you analyzed both, because to see where the payments were being made in terms of the contract.
Over and above the utilization, I was also performing an analysis in terms of how the contract, from a cash flow point of view, was being performed. I did note that from the outset, the funds between the 2 companies were being commingled. So for the purposes of this report, I clearly stated I see it as one and the same entity, because you cannot define the cash flow activity of one company other separately. Swifambo Rail Holdings, Swifambo Rail Leasing's money seen as one, and PRASA paid into both those accounts, even though, again, they were only supposed to pay into the Rail Leasing's standard bank account.
And that's because of a term of the contract?
Yes, Chairperson.
Okay. Now, at paragraph, and we will come to that. I mean, I think you do deal with it in more detail. In paragraph 5.2, you make the point that this is a first-level analysis, and I know you dealt with it a little earlier. Could you explain to the chairperson what would be what you would try to achieve with a first-level analysis, and then what you would try to achieve with a second-level analysis?
The Chairperson, again, the first level, as I explained in my report, is simply confirming flow of funds from PRASA to Swifambo and who Swifambo paid, how they utilized that money. Then I drew a line. And I said the second level analysis is those recipients of money from Swifambo. How did they utilize their money? Again, a flow of funds analysis by its very nature, when you're dealing with lots of bank accounts, requires a lot of supporting information. At this time, when I prepared the report, we were still, again, in the midst of completing first level analysis, how Swifambo utilized their money, which was, again, mostly completed, subject to 1 or 2 provisos, which I put in the report. But then it was anticipated and explained clearly that I needed to still do the second level analysis in order to conclude my investigation and to provide an ultimate opinion as I was mandated to do, which again I never completed.
Now, with the first level analysis, you can just conduct that by looking at the bank accounts, where the money came from. So you compare the source of the money to the account in which it was received. Would that be correct?
That is correct, Chairperson.
Now, what would the second level, in order to conduct a proper second level analysis, what more would you need?
So, Chairperson, PRASA pays Swifambo 2.6 billion rand. I see the money coming into Swifambo's bank accounts. I see entity A was a recipient of 30 million rand from Swifambo. First, through subpoena, I get entity A's bank statements. I can confirm then that Swifambo pays money into that account. What entity A did with the money, considering how all the allegations, the suspicions, what the money was used for, through, for example, meetings between Mr. Molefe and Mr. Mashaba and other investigation. Remember, this is Mr. Chairperson, this is a all-encompassing investigation. I'm just providing the flow of funds, but there's also allegations and suspicions as to what money is used for. And I take that information and I marry it up to the flow of funds to see, yes, there's an allegation that this person received money, gratuitous payment. The bank statements now have shown that that person received this gratuitous payment, or there's no commercial basis, so forth. So the first level is to say, well, here's the payment from Swifambo into entity A's bank account. I have entity A's bank account. I confirm the receipt. Now, what did entity A do with that money? Where did that money go? That is the second level analysis, and that's where I required more information to perform that. So we can say, ultimately, I say to the police at the end of the day, police, this is where PRASA's money's gone, based on all the allegations and the suspicions.
Now, I take it one of the questions in this case that you were looking at is, where the persons who received the money from the Swifambo entities, directly or indirectly, were the persons who received the money, or did the persons perform some service which added value for the money they received?
Chairperson, to summarize, as it is set out in the civil papers, it was established and judged by the Supreme Court. To my understanding, I wasn't part of that process, that Swifambo, the contract was irregular. It was set aside. Swifambo was a fronting company. In a nutshell, the bulk majority of the funds would be going to a third party foreign company who was manufacturing the locomotives. And my analysis shows that Swifambo, well, it has been established that Swifambo had no business operations. It had no cause or validation for the amounts that it expended over and above the money that flowed to Vosloo, or Vosloo being the foreign manufacturer of the locomotives, and some payments to South African Revenue Services. It states in those papers that there is no commercial rationale for all these payments. At the time that the information I was based on, we're looking at a 300-400 million rand over and above the payments that went to Vosloo and to SARS. And there is no commercial basis from what I could see in my independent opinion, and supported through the civil process, why Swifambo would be making those payments.
Then at paragraph 5.7.1, you make the point about the accounting records of Swifambo.
Yes, Chairperson. So my investigation was focused solely on the bank statements. When you're performing a forensic investigation, you would hope to receive additional supporting information that could help you unravel the cause or business reason for a payment. Every company would have a book of records and supporting information. So, for example, there would be a general ledger or a balance sheet and income statement or invoices that could help me understand or help an investigator understand or could point to the investigator to say, well, what could this payment be for? Not saying that the accounting records would be accurate. Generally, in an investigation where there's a suspicion of fraud or corruption or theft, those documents could be manipulated. However, all I had was the bank statements. But as I state in the report, the bank statements were revealing enough. The bank statements says all. I do not believe that there would be supporting information. I just made that point just to qualify that all I had was bank statements. And I do understand that subsequent in the liquidation of Swifambo, the liquidator supported my conclusions or the findings that I had. And the liquidator would have access to those financial records. And the liquidator's report substantively supported my findings at this time. However, the liquidator's report wasn't part of this criminal investigation process.
Yes, I mean, in fact, it's only been drawn up in February 2020.
Chairperson, if I was allowed to complete the investigation, I would have obtained this information and drawn these conclusions. I have, again, in my independent expert view, the flow of funds supports all the allegations made. And as Council and I will go through, we will see the quantums of money flowing out and who the recipients of that money is, PRASA's money.
What do you need in order to complete your investigation?
Chairperson, amongst other things, I'd need more bank accounts. There is...
Is the position that all that the Hawks needed to do is to come back to you and say, continue, we give you the authority to continue, and to the extent that you may need them to play a supportive role to your investigation by doing the paperwork that may need to be done in order to obtain bank information on bank accounts of recipients. Is that all that you would need from them?
That is probably the main pieces of information I would need. Obviously, there would be, in all investigations, there would be some other information that would arise out of. Investigation is not, it's fluid. You are correct, Chairperson, that the bank accounts is what I really needed. If I had continued on the same trajectory that I was busy with, and the toing and froing with the colonel, I was busy working with a very competent colonel at the time who obviously wasn't involved at higher decision making in the Hawks, but he certainly was a very helpful resource, and we were working closely together. And I said, Colonel, I need this bank account. He would go get that bank account for me. That stopped. So yes, you are correct.
So basically, you would need the authorization. You would have needed their authorization that you must continue, and then to the extent that legally you might need them to do certain things for you because you couldn't do them, then they would just do that. But if you could complete the investigation without them, but legally you would still complete it, isn't it?
Yes.
If there is a way of completing it without them.
I cannot complete the investigation chips without them because I need their authority to go get subpoenas for me.
That is, if you do it for them.
Yes, if I do it for them.
If you don't do it for them, you don't need their permission.
Yes.
Because you have got the report.
Yes, that is correct.
You have done the investigation, you have got the report.
Yes.
They are not giving you the go-ahead.
Yes.
It's in the public interest that you should complete the investigation. And,
yes.
If there is another body that can legally say, we are interested in you completing this, I'm not sure that it should be a problem.
Yes, Chairperson. Obviously,
I don't know if they after sitting with the report for 4 years, they can have any grounds to come and say, no, please don't do it for somebody else. We are interested in it.
Yes, that's correct, Chairperson.
Yeah, but I'm just asking from the point of view of your willingness, that
Yeah.
provided everything was done legally,
Yes.
you would have no problem.
Yes, Chairperson, that is correct. I didn't stop the investigation.
Yes. Well, yesterday there was or was it the day before, there was a debate about whether a certain sentence in a letter meant that the former Minister of Transport wanted to stop the investigation. So, okay, all right, continue, Mr. Song.
As you please. Now, in paragraph 7, you indicate the information that is still outstanding.
That is correct, Chairperson.
And you confirm that that's all that's outstanding, as the chairperson said, if you were to complete your report.
Yes, Chairperson, that is correct.
What's your estimate of how much time you would need if you were to be asked legally to do whatever was outstanding?
Chairperson, I will not lie, it's quite a difficult question because I don't control the process.
Yes.
Yes, it's a process of information flow, requesting further information, analysing that information. There's also other, I say in this investigation, I was assisted by other investigators who helped me
with certain aspects.
Certain aspects of the investigation.
Yes, yes.
A key part of such a wide or vast flow of funds analysis is forensic RT assistance in terms of putting all the bank records into some kind of electronic format to make the investigation quicker and efficient, less costly also. When we're looking at I've got 20 lever arch files already of bank accounts to try and to marry the flow of funds amongst the bank accounts. And some bank accounts, Chairperson, could have thousands of transactions. Some might only have 2 transactions. And you have to make a call. There's 100 transactions. I need the bank to tell me which bank account that went to. And just say, for example, Chairperson, it went to an individual or company. We have to establish through police work or intelligence work who that individual is, what company is that, what is the rationale. By its very nature, this type of investigation is concealment of funds. That information is not readily available. And as soon as you go ask a individual or entity, what do you receive this money for? They're not putting their hand up and saying, oh, sorry, I don't have any basis for this. So there is it's a team, it's a working team of which I'm one aspect. However, I am the person who's doing the flow of funds analysis. I was the point person for the money.
So it's difficult to say.
Yeah, let's say hypothetically, it took 1 year to get to this point. Amongst all the reasons of meetings and correspondence and getting information, maybe 1 more year to complete the second flow analysis.
Okay.
It's difficult to say.
Okay.
Chairperson, may I just point out, and it relates to the question you've asked. We've consulted with the liquidator who is going to be our next witness.
Yes.
And for various reasons, they have had to do a forensic analysis. So it may be that the question and whatever is on your mind,
might be answered.
And one can take the matter further on that basis, that some of the work has since been, some work has since been done, or of a forensic nature. But I didn't pursue that too much with him, but I know that
okay, no, that's all right.
Counsel, if I may, just one point I should add at this point is that crucial to any investigation is a case plan, of which a forensic audit forms one aspect of that plan. I was not aware of that case plan. In a meeting leading up to my report, there was a meeting just before I sent my report. There were still discussions of what is the case plan. All this information in my report, not all of it is going to find its way into a sworn statement, into criminal evidence. The MPA might say, no, we don't want to pursue that payment, we don't want to pursue this payment. So that aspect still has to be done, that case plan. I can't say, well, finish my report, it's now time to go arrest people. There is a lot of teamwork involved, even just to get to that point, which in another investigation I'm doing very similar. I see how that works. Yes, we need to finish the work for this investigation to complete, and as council says, there's more information, which I never had the time because of the liquidation, which would escalate completing the flow of funds. Then we move on to the charges. Who's going to get charged? How they're going to get charged? What's the evidence, affidavits, supporting it, so forth, so forth.
Okay.
You've had a look at the liquidator's report. I'm not talking about the forensic report. We're going to come to that because what I understand you to say is that what you have found is to a large extent reinforced by what is contained in the liquidator's report.
That is correct, Chairperson.
But we will deal with that to see where there's a synergy between your so-called preliminary report and their final report to shareholders of February last year.
That's correct, Chairperson.
All right. Now, you make the point in paragraph 8 that your analysis doesn't constitute an audit for the purposes of the international standards on auditing. I take it that's a disclaimer of sorts.
Yes, Chairperson, it's just a pure disclaimer.
Then let's look at paragraph 9, where you deal with the background to the appointment of Swafamba. Many of these details, or much of this information, has been presented to the Commission, mainly by Mr. Molefe when he gave evidence, and he gave quite extensive evidence. I'd just like you to indicate what, in regard to the background, the chairperson should keep in mind.
Chairperson, I guess what's most important to this tender, and as I've set out in how it's explained in the civil applications, is how at all times the Swafamba contract was always intended to go to, or the locomotive tender was always intended to go to Swafamba, and how it was set up inter alia along the request for proposals, the bidding, the companies who participated, the valuation, the adjudication. It all points to Swafamba receiving this contract. And what's also important is that Swafamba was not, there was glaring irregularities in terms of Swafamba being that company, in terms of not having properly registered for tax purposes, not having the relative experience in rail, and the fact that they were going to outsource the manufacture completely to another foreign company, which what's important is that until Swafamba actually signed the contract with PRASA, there was no contractual relationship with their partner or subcontractor. And that whole relationship wasn't properly detailed or transparent in this whole process. So bearing in mind how Swafamba got it and the pricing of the contract, ultimately it's PRASA was paid, or it signed a rand-denominated contract. In actual fact, it was a euro contract. All of that is just, it was irregular from the beginning part right until the end of signing the contract, and ultimately to the flow of funds, and you receive money. So I guess to Council's point, I hope I clarified that.
I just wanted to raise one point, that in paragraph 11.6 of your report. See, in paragraph 9, you deal with the background to the appointment of Swafambo. I just want, and that's why I thought, I'd point out that the date of the contract is important, or the date of the issue of the tender, which being December 2011, because maybe we should first look at paragraph 11.6 to 11.11, because those are matters, 11.6, 7, and 8, because those are matters that come before the issue of the tender.
Chairperson.
Will you deal with those? And I know it's before the tender.
Yes.
Can you set out the important events that preceded the issue of the tender?
Chairperson, as I read from our report, PRASA published the request for expressions of interest, which is RFEI, on 24th and 26th July 2009.
That's you reading from paragraph 11.6.
11.6, sorry. Paragraph 11.7, in May 2011, the first involvement of FOSLU, who ultimately was the partner or subcontractor to Swafambo, inspected PRASA's fleet. June 2011, in paragraph 11.8, Mr. Daniel Mtumkulu, who was the former PRASA chief engineer, authorized the supply of air conditioning systems from FOSLU. And then that led up, those were the events leading up to the RFP being published on 27 and 28 November 2011. What was important in paragraph 11.10, that the RFP was collected by someone from a company called the S Group, as it was denoted on the register, and not from a representative of Swafambo. And this, in paragraph 11.11, Swafambo responded to the tender as Mafori Finance Vryheid, trading as Swafambo Leasing on 27 February 2012. The subparagraph to that is Swafambo Holdings acquired Mafori Finance Vryheid on 7 February 2012. So as the company that responded to the tender was essentially a brand new company that had only been around for the purposes of, I guess, responding to this tender, for 20 days old.
Now, the S Group, we've heard evidence in on a different matter relating to a payment being made to the CIA Group. Is this the same group you're talking about?
My understanding, Chairperson, is there's a collection of companies under the nomenclature S Group, including CIA, and as my report will go into, it identify specific CIA entities that were beneficiary of funds from Swafambo.
And who was the person behind the S Group and the CIA?
Well, Chairperson, my investigation, as my report sets out, the actual signatories of bank accounts and directors of companies that received money from Swafambo was an individual by the name of Mackenzie Mabunda.
On behalf of the S Group?
On behalf of S Group or linked companies.
All right, then you make the point that the tender was issued on the 2nd of December 2011. The RFP was published on that day, and there were 6 people who responded. One of them being Swafambo. Now, in paragraph 9.4, you list the shareholders of Swafambo. Who were they?
Chairperson, the shareholders at the time of Swafambo was Mr. Oswell Mashaba, Identity Capital Partners Pty Limited, Tinta Makosi Empowerment Trust, and Hadassah Mining House Pty Limited.
Okay. We can deal.
Maybe that might be the convenient time, Mr. Soni.
As you please, Chairman.
Let's take the lunch adjournment. We'll return at 2 o'clock. We adjourn.